Yosh! Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for hitting that download button. We know there are countless video game podcasts out there you could be listening to right now, so good on you for picking the best one. So hey, grab your stack of quarters, fire up your Mad Catz turbo controllers, because you got company tonight. Everybody plug in, get comfy on your neighbor's couch, because it's time for Local Co-op. All right, so let's dive right in, shall we? Local Co-op is a three-player podcast that dissects, discusses, disagrees, and debates video games, game culture, and that sweet spot that video games caress in your cold, cynical gamer hearts. I'm the king of Mike style, Colin Vignault, and I am sitting here in the OMV podcast studio live with my two strongest party members. We have Arcade Stick Ken Houston.
What's up?
There it is, excellent. And the man of 1,000 consoles, Zach Sharbs.
Hey, what's up?
What's going on? So, inaugural pilot episode of our podcast here, guys. Thanks again for joining us here. So, let's really get into the thick of it. Ken, I'm going to start with you, my man. When you think of local co-op, as a term, as a podcast itself, what is it that people can expect when they plug us into their earbuds?
Well, I mean, local co-op, when you were a kid, and even now, I mean, I feel like it doesn't happen as often now, but when you were a kid growing up, a lot of us, the best times were playing games with your friends. That's where my passion for video games stemmed from. All my best memories are playing games with my friends. When I jotted down like all my favorite games, like a lot of these are multiplayer games. And that's where my passion come from, that competition, that the trash talk, but then the good times, the high fives, all of it. And when I think about how I feel about games, I think about the passion I have for them, and it all stems from that. So I just want to get that passion out, and I think this is the best outlet to do that.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Hence, that's why I'm also in this room. Zach Sharbs, local co-op to you, my friend. What do you think?
I mean, Ken hit it right on the head, I mean, talk about games with your friends and get into what everyone likes about a certain game, whether it's story, gameplay, how excited they are about a new game that's going to be coming out. I mean, it's the culture, I guess. It's a lot of people share the passion. It's a hobby. It's a sport. Yeah. It's many things to a lot of different people. Yeah. And talking about that, I think, is what I would want to be on local co-op.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you guys. Ken, you kind of nailed it for me when you said, like, local co-op, you just flash back to, like, I immediately get nostalgic for when I was a kid. Because I think our generation, millennials or whatever you want to call it, we grew up when video games really were bigger than just, like, Pong and ColecoVision and Atari. I name-dropped ColecoVision before I did Atari. Is that weird that I did that?
No, it's not.
Somewhere the guy who created ColecoVision is like, yeah.
I name-dropped ColecoVision.
He's totally listening to this.
Yeah, I'm sure.
This
he
podcast.
or she. So, yeah, I immediately jumped to, like, everyone, summer vacation, going to my neighbor's house, and, like, we'll all play, GoldenEye or Donkey Kong 64. Like, that had a fun multiplayer. I don't know if you guys can talk about that.
I think just the N64 in general.
Yeah, I just go into, like, these early memories of, like, get all the Sprite and Oreos and Doritos and everyone, like, sleep over your buddy's house because we're going to play Mortal Kombat all night, or we got Smash Brothers hooked up and we're going to have a tournament. Like, it dives right into that. And when I think of the podcast itself, local co-op is rare when it comes to a game now, because all cooperative games are all online multiplayer. And it's great you can put people, you got people in your headsets, but there is something different about everyone just hanging out in a room together, which sounds cheesy or lame, but there is a difference. And I think we grew up in a time where we were lucky where that was the way to play with your pals. And what I think local co-op is going to be as a podcast is people coming together to talk about not just, when I can just like be a review game podcast. So if you're looking for, like, I give it a 9 out of 10, we're not going to be that kind of game. I kind of want to get into the nitty and gritty of what it is that we love about a game, a story, a character, what it is that games, what we get out of them other than just killing time before, you got to go to bed or something like that, or, and that sort of thing. And I think people coming together to talk about that passionately, I love. And any time, doesn't matter what the subject is, as long as someone is talking passionately about something, I can listen to that forever, and then I, in turn, get hyped up about it. So I think, especially of something like this, where I think so many people have those memories, and you hear that phrase, local co-op, and everyone will go back to what it was growing up for them. They immediately think of what that game is, what that game was at the time. And maybe I think that's like a good place to start. I mean, the listeners are diving in for the first time, same as us here. So let's give them a bit of a taste of kind of who we are as gamers, what it is that we come looking for when it comes to picking up a controller, putting quarters into a machine, the whole works there. Let's start with arcade stick, Ken Houston over here. Ken, what's kind of like your gaming history? Let's give the people a sense of what they can expect when it comes to you.
Well, I mentioned before how a lot of my best memories are spent with other people playing games. My first video game experience I ever remember is pushing a chair up to an arcade cabinet in one of the local bowling alleys, and that's how I played games. Arcades quickly became the way I played games. I had an NES at home, played the heck out of it, but a lot of my best gaming memories are in an arcade, all the way up through my teenage years, all the way up into my 20s, and I wish still now, they're not really around anymore. It's hard to find them, but it's always been about, like, when I think of my favorite systems, I think of the Nintendo 64, 4 players, Mario Kart, Mario Party, all those games. The Dreamcast, Power Stone, Power Stone 2, Soul Calibur was on the Dreamcast. All my favorite games were multiplayer games, and that's where a lot of my history resides. People will learn in time. I'm obviously big on fighting games. Love fighting games. You talked about how a lot of games, it's about the online experience now. Like, one of the last bastions of that co-op experience is fighting games. Like, when you go to a tournament, you're right next to the person, and that's a different aspect of gaming that I feel like doesn't get talked about a lot. So I'm hoping to bring that to light and talk about that experience. Other than that, I went through the Super Nintendo Golden Age, as I like to refer to it. RPGs, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI.
Best gen.
It's very well might be. I hope we get a chance to talk about that one day. What is the best era?
Attitude era. Oh, you mean I'm sorry.
But then, all the way up through like PlayStation 1, you have Final Fantasy VII, Saga Frontier. Now I experienced kind of a video game renaissance back when I got an Xbox 360. I was kind of late to the boat. Didn't really play a lot. Came back. Bayonetta, definitely one of my favorite games ever. And now I feel like I've kind of settled into a niche of, like, I know what my favorite game is. It's something that's just over the top, immerses me, and that's really what describes my gaming style, I guess you could say, is just something that's going to really bring me in and give me that escapism, just larger than life, over the top. I love that stuff.
You say when you grew up in like an arcade setting, like, I think location was a big deal with how you could get to arcades, because I think as we grew up, they were just about on the cusp of kind of ending, or not really ending, but fading out.
They were going from like video game arcades to ticket arcades,
Yeah.
which is completely different.
So like maybe we could have like that was more my arcade, is like,
Yeah.
let's have a one-on-one battle at Crane Machine and see who gets the most, crappy prizes.
Skee ball. And the basketball shooting game.
It's like, these video games are weird. Why am I sort of exercising? That's my excuse. That's what I would label exercising, is skee ball and basketball. I mean, what were you playing on the arcade cabinet? Like, I know you're huge into Tekken and stuff.
I mean, like, it's the first game I remember playing was the original Street Fighter, not Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter, where player 1 was Ryu, player 2 was Ken. That's like the first game, but then, I mean, there's plenty of games like Street Fighter 2 obviously came along, But then really, it's what started really build it up was I remember specifically playing Tekken 2 in another bowling alley arcade and just falling in love with it. Like mashing the kick buttons is law was like my dream come true. Like I was just like, I'm playing Bruce Lee. This is amazing. And then it just went from there. I remember when Tekken 3 came out, I played that to hell and back. Tekken Tag Tournament. I still have my copy of Tekken Tag Tournament from PlayStation 2. I can't bear to part with it. My first tournament I ever entered was Tekken Tag Tournament, the original. What I think may be the best fighting game ever, and where I really got serious, was Soul Calibur 2.
Wow, throwing it down, his favorite fighting game ever.
I've put a lot of thought into that.
Wow.
Like it very well might be Soul Calibur 2.
Is that the one that's on PS2, GameCube, Xbox, or is that 3?
No, you're right.
Yeah, that's 2 with Link.
You had Link and everything, yeah.
Spawn and Heihachi.
I had the Link copy.
Yeah, there's different. But
When
yeah,
Heihachi.
but
I can imagine. Just pop in real quick. Like growing up as a kid in arcade cabinets and arcade machines, that must have been pretty cutthroat. Because if you lost, you don't play anymore. And so if someone comes up and they want to play against you, they pop in their quarters. You better beat them, otherwise you're done. You gotta throw down some more coins.
Anybody who's ever like played games in the arcade and wanted to win definitely knows the feeling of having to go back to the change machine. Like, yeah, going back to the change machine, that was a thing. But no, absolutely. I had grown men, like as I was 12, 13 years old, I had to be driven to the mall. I had grown men get angry at me because I was beating them. Not because I was good, mind you. Like I remember playing as King and just repeatedly big booting a guy, and he got mad, looked at me straight in the eye, and went, "That's all you're gonna do?" And I just looked at him and went, I guess. If it's working, I'm 12.
I'm 12.
And I'm playing as a man with a Jaguar mask. This is great. I'm living the dream.
So yeah, I think we'll probably come to you when we need some real fighting game knowledge, know-how, because I'm kind of like a pick Johnny Cage and spam ball breaker when it comes to one-on-one games like that.
I'm kind of like that too, though.
Well, yeah, but you do that successfully, and you win your fights, and you go to Evo, and things are wonderful. I mean, and Zach, tell us about your gaming history, because I know out of the three of us, Ken has always been. I would consider Ken as obviously the most. Not he is the competitive one out of the three of us, but he has played competitively more than either of us have, which is to say we have never played. But Ken, goes out and hunts down and goes to tournaments and seeks these things out. You are different from myself in the fact that you are like a collector. You're like you're like that guy in the Guardians of the Galaxy, the collector. You're Benicio del Toro. You've got.
I'll take it.
You go back, you get the old systems, you get the old games. Even if you find like, oh, I have this game, but this one's in a nicer copy, I wouldn't put it past you to get it. Like, oh, you got to hunt down the instruction. Like you're that gamer, and everybody knows that guy. But you're not just keep it in the box. You will play everything too. So tell me about your gaming. How did that start?
Probably my cousin's probably the easy pick. He's like 6 years older than me, and I remember going to my aunt's house, and he had a NES set up in the back. And I mean, you guys know my cousin is a huge gamer, bigger than I am. And at that time, he still had a ton of NES games. And I remember seeing games like Kirby's Adventures, I think was the NES game. Super Mario Brothers 3, definitely. From there, I was addicted. I remember my parents getting me my Super Nintendo because I was too young for the NES era, I guess. So my first console was the Super Nintendo. I remember getting Super Mario World, Mario Paint, Turtles in Time.
Turtles in Time.
Oh, I love that game. I beat that game so many
Talk about
times.
local co-op.
Oh, huge local co-op game. And then games like NBA Jam, and I would play all these like arcadey or things I would see on TV. I mean, I'm in kindergarten, first grade. And eventually got a Game Boy. I had like Tetris and Pokemon, obviously, when that came around, which was a little further down the road. But I remember like my first moment where I was like, games are bigger than what I thought, was my babysitter came over with a copy of Chrono Trigger, and my mind was blown. Like I was just second grade maybe. I was finally like able to read and stuff like that. So like getting into the story and realizing there's characters and like there's a progression, like there's something happening. It's a 40-hour game. And that blew my mind. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And from then on, I mean, got a PS1, Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9, Tactics better than all three of those.
Oh God, you guys are just throwing the gauntlet down. Episode 1, laying it out like this is
Final Fantasy Tactics is the most underrated Final Fantasy game all time.
Yeah, I feel like that's a safe
Underrated.
statement to
I don't know
make.
if it's
That's cool.
I
But
don't-
to just come out hard like, hey man, this is the best one. That's kind of a big
I don't know
deal.
if it's underrated. We'll discuss.
Let's
and,
see if we get picked up to series. You never know with pilot season.
And so I ended up having PS1. I had an N64, but it was mostly used for multiplayer family games, Mario Kart, GoldenEye. So I never got into sadly, I never played Ocarina of Time when it was out. I had to play that fairly recently. But yeah, I moved into covered everything Nintendo and PlayStation up until the 360 because the 360 was everyone owns it. If you want to play games with your friends, you pretty much need to own a 360. And not to mention, I just got into college, and PS3s were very expensive when they first came out, so
True.
it was kind of easy to just be like, I'll get an Xbox 360. Halo is like the big thing, so everyone's playing Halo and first-person shooters
Bringing out
and
the
everything
LAN
like
parties, yeah.
that. But and then it started with games like Mass Effect and Fallout that would bring me back to single-player experiences. Red Dead Redemption, BioShock, and I eventually got a PS3 late in the game. Pumped out all the Uncharted's, Last of Us, single player games, and I'm just sticking with Sony, man. Like, it's if you want good single player games, stories, original titles, that's the place to be.
That's good. It's all good stuff. Now, I'm going to, full disclosure, I was just at Zach's house. This was, last week, and I was going through, when we were in pre-production for this, I was looking at your games because you busted out, here's another set of my SNES games. And he's got the boxes, which is a big deal because for me as a kid, growing up because I had the SNES as well, I didn't know they came in boxes. I just assumed because I had all these games, they were all just the cartridges laying around. But somehow Zach had the know-how to keep everything.
It wasn't even me. Like, my mom and my dad were always just they would I had a big plastic tray thing I could put 20 games in. Take the game out of the box, put the cardboard box on top of the TV. Or on top of the refrigerator, sorry. And that's just where they stayed for 20 years. It's crazy.
That's wild. And they're all in good shape.
Yeah, and then you look at now where people are crazy about collecting NES and Super Nintendo games, and if you have a complete unbox with the instruction manual, games are going for a lot. And I'm just I just always had them.
When did that shift kind of occur? Because now I know you're kind of a headhunter when it comes to getting I love this game. I want to go get this. When did that shift kind of happen for you?
I'd say probably since I got a job where I can afford to do things like that. I mean, let's be serious. But I mean, what made me think about it is my Super Nintendo that I had since I was 6. I've always had. It's always worked. Never sold it. I never sold hardware. I always kept my consoles, every single one, and every single one has made it except my original Game Boy. That thing took a beating and it just didn't last. But everything after that,
It's made a Nintendanium. What'd you do to that thing?
Yeah,
all I remember is that the gray cover on the screen popped off completely
Yes.
and the
Okay,
LED
no,
was
that
exposed.
did happen. Yep.
that is a weak spot.
But yeah, I kept my Game Boy Advance SP, which is the last console to play the original Game Boy cartridges. So that's really all you need anyways. Plus rechargeable backlight. Come on.
Your rechargeable back.
Yeah, you remember
Kids
having
playing
to
now are
sit
like,
under the
"What?"
lamp with your Game Boy being I can barely see this Pokemon.
I had one of those
Colin
things
and
that
I-
clipped onto the Game Boy with a light on it.
Colin and I were actually just talking about that. Colin owned a Game Gear, and I'm sure he could touch on more of that.
Yeah, I
but
had a Game
It
Gear.
occurred to him, he was like, wait, video games used to use batteries at one point. Because
Yeah.
I told him, I was like, yeah, the Game Gear, that was a battery hog. It
like
used
six
it used
AA.
6 AA's, and it drained them like that. Because it was full color, backlit. And that just killed it.
It was solid for a good half a level.
Of Echo the Dolphin.
Well, you just have to plug it in, right? Couldn't you play with it plugged in or something
I
like that?
feel like it had an antenna on it. It's weird. That thing was massive.
It was big. And the screen wasn't that
That
big.
thing is
compared to
bigger
the
than
rest
my
of it.
microwave now, which is weird because I would play Sonic the Hedgehog on it. Interesting
On the
stuff.
microwave?
Yeah, I'm on microwave. It's just as good as Sonic Unleashed. When it comes to my gaming history, a little different. I think I'm, out of the three of us, probably the most, for some reason I want to say the word relaxed, but lackadaisical when it comes to my games. I it's more of a general hobby with me. My history was like, I think my first real gaming memory, and I can remember this very, very clearly, was Christmas once. My parents opening up a giant box that said was the Super Nintendo as a gift, and it came with Donkey Kong Country. And I just remember looking at it and being like, "What is this toy?" I didn't understand what it was, and I just remember in my living room,
I'm sitting over going, "That's an amazing gift."
I was like, "What's this big green box?" Like, I don't know. It's got leaves on it because it was like the Donkey Kong Country thing. And
Very snazzy dressed,
yeah,
primate.
And when you're a kid, like you don't know. I was so away from video game culture, like I didn't know what things were called. So like until I was like 9, I thought levels in games were called boards. like I would go to my friend and be like, "Oh, my favorite board on Donkey Kong is with when you're underwater and you get the swordfish." And he's like, "Board? What are you talking about?" Because to me it was like a video game, it was a board game, weird stuff. So SNES was like my first real console, and like I would dab. Like my grandparents had the original Nintendo, and I would play, Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. And I was like, oh my god, I have this gun and I shoot the TV and it reacts like I'm shooting the TV. This is crazy. And from there, I just always had the Super Nintendo. From there, it went to the PlayStation. My uncle brought a PlayStation over once with Tekken 2, I think. And he would always play as June, and I'd be like, "Why do you want to be the girl? Why don't you be the cool guy with the leather jacket?" Because I was a stupid little kid. And I was like, the guy is obviously stronger, but he would wreck me. From there, PlayStation went to PlayStation 2 to the PlayStation 3. I was always a Sony guy, save for the Nintendo. And my games that I would really get a lot of the enjoyment from would be story-driven games. I think since I've grown up, that has been the consistent factor when it comes to the games that I like, that I enjoy. So now I'll really play pretty much anything save for the sports games, just because I don't feel like they have a story. Not because mechanically I'm sure they're fine, just not for me. I like something that's got a little bit more meat on the bone, so to speak. Yeah, my gaming history has been kind of all over the place. PlayStation, PS2, PS3, PS4, and I'm pretty firmly entrenched in that. I tried Steam for a little bit, but too much. I was kind of on sensory overload. There's like a billion games to choose from, and everything is $1. So I'm like, I'll play everything for like 20 minutes.
Especially during the summer.
Seriously,
in the winter.
yeah. Steam sale, that thing. That's what it is, right? Jeez. Growing up, I never really appreciated what made a good game, because I was like, I just got what I like. If I like Toy Story, I'm gonna go buy the Toy Story game because I like Toy Story, not because I heard the level design is amazing, and the gameplay, it's crazy, the mechanics. As a kid, like that's all I enjoyed, and I think that's really how I was, like all the way growing up. Like I would get Dragon Ball Budokai, like the first one. 2 and 3 are great, mind you, those are good games. But I would go out and get the things just because I liked whatever it was, so to speak. Like I remember at one point, like I was at a video game store. I don't know. This is a little mini story here, and I asked the guy at the counter, I was like, "Can I have Dragon Ball Z, The Legacy of Goku on Game Boy Advance?" And he said, "Are you sure?" And I remember this. I swear to God, he said that to me. And I was like, "Yes." He's like, "You really want me to get you that game?" And I was like, "Yeah." And because he said that is when I started to realize, like, oh, games can be bad. And because I played that, and I was like, this sucks. I can't punch. So I think once
I'm sorry, but I had that game. I
The
don't
first
think it
one
was
is
too
bad.
bad.
The first one is bad.
I don't think it was. I've definitely played worse though.
Well, I mean that's subjective, but it was bad. There's bad.
There's also a special disappointment when it's something that you do care about.
Yeah, exactly. Since I've sort of matured into the games I like, all of my favorite games are either something that's multiplayer but not necessarily one-on-one, but something that we can all play together. Like I think the first real multiplayer game that I went absolutely batshit over was Super Smash Brothers, because what I love about that game, besides the fact that I think I'm pretty okay at it, is
I can beat you one-on-one with Pikachu, no big deal.
Let's
He's
dial it down. I may have done better than Colin in a tournament, but we're not going to talk about that now.
That's okay.
Just for the record.
Under pressure, Ken, you are the competitive guy. That's fine. That's cool. That's totally cool. But like, in our own homes, we're comfy, we're in our zone.
I've
here.
never
I
gotten mad at
slaughter
that game.
everybody.
I've never gotten mad at that game when you've played me ever.
No.
I've never. stormed
I only
out of the
know
house.
what tilting is because I play games with Ken. That's how. Like for a while, I was like, I think that's just a phrase Ken made up, but it's real. Yeah. So Smash. What I love about that game and the games like that is, I love games where there are a lot of characters in them, because I really like when I think of a character, and then I assign it to my friends. I don't know why I do that, but I do that with everything. All my favorite role-playing games, my favorite, anything like that. I'm always like, oh, that's Ken. If you can rename people, I do that every time. Oh, this is going to be Jeremy. Jeremy's Locke in my Final Fantasy VI. I don't know if you guys knew that. And Zach, you're Edgar. Sorry, Ken. I know you're a big Edgar guy.
Is that a good thing?
Yeah, he fights with a chainsaw.
I mean, to be honest, when I was a kid, I named Shadow Ken.
That makes sense.
And I know one of the first lines you hear about Shadow in that game is you ask some dude in a bar and he goes, "Shadow? Oh, he'd slit his mother's throat for a nickel." So instead it said, "Ken? Oh, he'd slit his mother's throat for a nickel." And I was kind of like, it's not wrong.
This is also a form of therapy for everyone here on the podcast, Tom. So yeah, I really like that game. I love games that are big with lore, and I think that's what I'm really coming to really enjoy about games. That's what I really look for. I like when it comes to fighting games, I like to think of who's your guy, who's your main, not because of strategy, but because like that way when I'm at home practicing, I can pretend I'm playing Zach, which sounds super sad, but also I love that. I love that shit. It's like my favorite stuff, and yeah, that's how I feel. Any comments on how I play games?
Well, I wanted to ask you because you really like story games,
yes,
but you also like naming the characters. See, for me, when I
True.
do that, I feel like it takes me out of the game.
Yes.
So, would you rather play a game, let's say, like Fallout or Mass Effect, where the character is you, or do you like rather playing games that you're playing a character like Joel in like Last of Us, where he's making his decisions, or would you rather you control the story?
Ooh, Zach, that's a damn fine question. That's damn.
Should we
fine.
pin that for an episode?
I'll try. I'll touch on it a little bit. I in a game like Mass Effect, you had to go Mass Effect because I love that too.
Yeah, I know.
And Last of Us also, and they're both great, both story-driven games, but they're both great for different reasons. I like Joel. And I love that because it's like a great book or a film, because that's basically it's just like playing through a film. And I feel like that's a real complete story. But what I love about Mass Effect is it's my story. And I think there's a difference between when I take like, this is a movie that I really like, as opposed to something that I have in my head that I experienced alone. My Mass Effect story is not your Mass Effect story. Yours isn't his isn't hers. So I like being able, if you can just rename the regular protagonist, great. I'll take that, and then that'll be me. Like with the Persona series, I always name the character some version of my name. Since it's in Japan, I like Japanese it up a little bit. And it doesn't take me out of the story. It puts me in the story more. And that's why I think both are good for the different reasons. But I don't think one is inherently better than the other. I get just as much out of the main character being named Colin than the main character being named Booker. But I do like that question, and I think we should circle back around at some point.
I think that's an excellent question that I think we actually touched on talking about it at some point, because I think it is especially nowadays with like the landscape of games and so many open world RPGs coming out, there is that. Sometimes you're playing as you. Sometimes you're playing as, the character that you are given. And then sometimes you have enough effect on the character you're given. Like, for instance, The Witcher. You make a lot of decisions in that game. You're always Geralt. You're not you. You're Geralt, but you're making decisions for Geralt. So it's almost like it's like that in between.
It's like a weird hybrid.
That's like the way
like
I played Mass Effect. Like I played Mass Effect like I was playing Commander Shepard.
Yeah,
so
that's
almost
the
like
thing.
I wasn't playing it like I am Commander Shepard. I played it almost like Ken said, like The Witcher. I played it like with that mentality that Commander Shepard is a character.
See, in saying this, what you're saying right now,
That's why I would normally play as FemShep, because it kind of like distances me
Takes
just
it
a
out.
little bit. Yeah, it takes me out of it a little bit more.
See, when you say that, in my head, I'm immediately like, you did it wrong, or you got less out of it than I did, which is the wrong way of thinking about it. But it's interesting that that's where my mind went.
I'm curious what you would think about The Witcher then, because The Witcher, like, he is a character, but you are making the decisions. You're not like, oh, I am Geralt. It's not like that. But you do make as many decisions, if not more, than you do as Commander Shepard.
I believe, and Witcher, I know you guys have really pushed for me to definitely play, and it's definitely something that I'm going to get through once I get through my current library of games. I don't think that would hinder my enjoyment of the story, in that he's already an existing person that I just make choices for. Because what's my favorite studio? Telltale.
It's true.
Those characters I make decisions for, but they're not me. Like Bigby Wolf, I'm not Bigby Wolf, but I still love that character. But my Bigby is different from yours. So I don't think it would hold me back, but I do. So interesting the different ways that you can play a game and first person, third person to actually being the character itself. So weird.
I'm thinking, would what we're talking about now be a good segue into our main topic?
Ooh, yeah.
Ooh, Arcade Stick Ken Houston coming up with some bright ideas.
I mean, we're talking, we're encroaching upon the what makes a game good. We're talking about, you have various different kinds of games. We're encroaching on our main topic, which is what makes a game good. Mm-hmm. Video games have now been around for quite some time. And you've got the early games where you could definitely feel like developers are testing the waters. A lot of ideas are thrown out there. And now we're starting to see the ideas take shape, and start to sculpt off some of the fat and really try to make the best games that developers could put out. And then you have independent games that are also trying to push the limits. So do we think that it might be time to step into the main topic?
Right into the danger zone. Yeah, 100%.
I like it.
I mean, Ken, you tell us, man, when you think of a game as good, what is it that makes a game good to you?
Because of just the way I think, I tried to put like a definition on it. Like just like if I had to define a good game, and what I came up with is it has the escapism of a great novel with the visuals of TV or a movie. And what it does is
it's poetic, my friend.
It sets out and exceeds upon its goal. Sets out and exceeds upon its goal. And I think that's important because every game has a different goal. We had a conversation just the other day about, how you can have an excellent game that you would not tell everybody to play. I think a really good example right now is Persona 5. I've fallen in love with Persona 5. I've completed it, 106 hours in, completed a first run through.
106, not bad.
I fully plan on doing.
That's a lot.
I fully plan on doing New Game Plus. I would tell the both of you to play it. Colin, you already are playing it. Sharbs, I know you want to put it on your docket. But there's plenty of other people who I wouldn't. That doesn't mean that it's not a good game. It just means that it's not going to be like appropriate for everyone. Appropriate's probably not the word, but it's not going to be in everybody's wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
not going to be your taste.
Like Colin, you said, you don't really play sports games. There's plenty of sports games out
Does
there.
Def Jam Vendetta count as a sports game?
Sports entertainment.
There we go. That is electrifying, my friend.
And I also I started to come up with examples of good games that that they're good games, but that doesn't mean that they're for every audience. Mm-hmm. Sports games, the 2K series, NBA 2K series, they're great. They continue to kind of improve upon themselves. They've been good since they started out on the Dreamcast. They're excellent basketball games. But if you don't like basketball, you're not going to get the same kick out of it as somebody who really enjoys basketball. I said before, what I think the best fighting game ever is Soul Calibur 2. And my people could, the people can argue with me, but I've put a lot
who you main in Soul Calibur?
It's Soul Calibur 2.
Yeah.
My go-to is Nightmare.
Okay.
Ooh, and then they took my character away, and the series kind of died from there for me. And I can talk a lot about...
Rip in peace.
You were talking about, like, characters, how you get, like... part of the reason why I enjoy fighting games so much is because of that feeling of you're this character. You have this character's abilities at this point in time. But digressing from my point, like Soul Calibur 2, I think it was the best fighting game because it did everything a fighting game should do exceptionally. The setting, fantastic. The stages, various. Like the music, it made you feel like you were in that game. It immersed you, while also giving you what a fighting game should give, which is a fun, varied, competitive experience.
Yeah.
Varied. Like,
plus, at the beginning of each fight, they would say something really epic, like "Two warriors clash at dawn," and I would be like, "Oh, it's on."
a tale of souls and souls.
There you go.
Eternally reborn.
Ooh, God.
But
Ooh, sweating a little bit.
yeah, it gave you that setting. Plus, the characters were varied. They were all very different. So everybody, you could find that play style that fit you, that really made you enjoy the game. The 3D, I think, I prefer 3D fighting games. That's just my preference. It's kind of what I came up around. Even I did play Street Fighter, but 3D just became my wheelhouse. I feel it gives you that ability to just diversify the way you play the game. And I think that's what makes Soul Calibur 2 the best. Not everybody plays fighting games, though. So plenty of people, and also Soul Calibur 2 had a fairly meaty single-player experience, which some fighting games miss, and that's why a lot of people don't play fighting games, because they're like, oh, well, I just want a game. I remember you described, when I said I wanted to play Injustice 2, you were like a good palate cleanser. And I was like, I don't see a fighting game as a palate cleanser whatsoever. I dive in. I'm going to, if I pick up a fighting game, I want to know that I'm going to be playing that months down the road, similar to the way we play Overwatch. That's how I view a fighting game. A fighting game to me isn't something that it's just like, oh, I'll play this for a couple weeks, I'll mash against the computer a little bit. Like, that's not how I view it. I want to eat that game up, tear it apart, figure it out. That's how I look at a fighting game, and that's what makes it fun to me. But once again, I know that that's not how everybody views it.
Yeah.
I still think that it's an excellent game. So I think that's important to talk about when you talk about games that are good, is that saying a game is good doesn't mean that you're going to say it's for everybody.
Can you toss me out, like, just 2 or 3 of your favorites, just so I can get an idea of where that's kind of coming from?
Favorite
games?
Just of all time?
Yeah. Or fighting games included, if you want to do that.
I mean, you've got Bayonetta. Bayonetta, if you like action, if you would ever even enjoy the Devil May Cry series, you're going to love Bayonetta. Bayonetta's super over the top. It's Bayonetta is almost like it's what I think of when I think of definitive Ken Houston games. Bayonetta. It's just crazy. It's wild.
You said that was the game that made you be like, whoa, man, I'm missing out on
was
games.
Like, yes,
right now.
I was like, I miss video games. That was the game, and it's still what I think about.
Gotta be a good game to pull somebody back into it.
Yeah, but I don't think I would tell everybody they gotta play Bayonetta, because it's a little wacky. It's almost too over the top for some people. I know some people like a more grounded experience.
Yep.
So you got Bayonetta, you got Soul Calibur 2. I'd say Persona 5. The other thing I thought about was like, okay, well, if I'm defining what a good game is, well, what makes a not so good game? What makes kind of like an average game? And I thought of Final Fantasy 15. Final Fantasy 15, it didn't really know what its goal was. And when you don't have a goal, you really can't exceed at that goal. Whereas Persona 5, also a Japanese RPG, so I'm comparing apples to apples, I believe. Persona 5, instead of trying to do everything and meet everybody's expectations, like with Final Fantasy 15, Final Fantasy 15 tried to meet the open world fans' expectations, the Japanese RPG fan expectations. It tried to meet the action game expectations. It tried to meet everybody's expectations, and it kind of missed the mark. Whereas Persona 5 was just like, we're just going to make the best Japanese RPG we could make. We're going to instead of trying to branch out, we're going to turn what we do up to 11. We're going to refine it, and we're going to put that out there. And it's been met with massive
critical
praise.
acclaim.
Yeah. I did the same comparison with Fallout and Witcher. Fallout 4, people considered it okay. It's more Fallout. That's good. people weren't huge fans of the settlements. I wasn't. I think Sharbs, you said you weren't a big fan of the
I
settlements.
think I skipped it almost completely.
But then you have The Witcher 3 came out around the same time.
Before.
A little before, around the same time. They were definitely compared to each other for good reason. They're very similar. Outside of setting, obviously. Now imagine Geralt in a Fallout suit. But Witcher just said, well, we're just going to take a Western RPG and we're going to dial it up to 11 and we're going to refine it. And it's now, it's one of the, most people consider it the best game of the generation currently. And I think those are good ways to look at things. Is you set a goal and you set to exceed that goal within your game. That's
so you're in your if I can sum up by basically just condensing all of the beautiful things you said into one word in a real smashing way, real focus in a game.
Yes.
Yeah. Zach Sharps, I need to know, my friend. You play, I think, out of all of us, the most games. You have the biggest library. You've hit all the highs, all the lows. And I like to think you know what's good, and when you pick it up, you know this is going to be good. And I've seen you skip things that you, just by looking at, you're like Rain Man, except, charming and awesome. Well, Rain Man is also, you're wonderful. You're a good guy.
Compare me to Rain Man.
But there's a reason. There's a reason they call you the man from with 1,000 consoles. What is it to you that makes a good game?
I think I've had the hardest, out of the three of us coming up with an answer to this question, because I can take a little of what Ken says, and I know we've discussed a little bit of what you like and what you think makes a good game. And then I started thinking about it, and then I looked at my list of, we were going to talk about what we're currently playing, and I realized that I have 8 games on there because I've touched that many games. I didn't finish that many games. I barely maybe played 20 minutes in some of them. But it's that hook. It's that itch. I mean, I like a lot of different genres, and people are always like, oh, this game just came out, it's really good, or this game came out like a couple years ago, it's really good. And it's on sale, I'll pick it up, give it a shot, see what I think. Like I started Darksiders, which is like a action game a la God of War, but it has a lot of Zelda elements, like Ocarina of Time elements.
It's like a modern day Zelda.
And it's not great. It's good.
For you.
And I think in general, like you're not gonna pick it up and be like, oh, this game just blows the socks off everything. Like it's a 3D action game, plain and simple. It's not deep. It's not really super shallow. Story's not like super interesting. There's no interesting characters. It's just mindless action.
So it seems like with you, like, because when you get into a game, you really feel it's good when you're like super sucked into it.
Like I can't stop thinking about it.
And you vanish into a game.
I
Like
do.
when you get a good game, like I don't see you. The only time I see you is when it says Sharptronic is online and he's playing this again. Like for The Witcher was the perfect example because it was constant. So you kind of know like right away, like I am into this game.
Like
you get really sucked in.
It's finding. I want to always be playing a game like that, and it's very hard to find one that's just going to do that to you. Like I played maybe 4 hours of Darksiders. Toss it aside. I started Unfinished Swan last night, which is a quote unquote walking simulator. It's made by the creators of Edith Finch, which just came out. But the game is all white, and the only action you do is shoot black paint, and it like paints the world. You're like going through a storybook.
Interesting. I'd play that.
It's not really actiony. It's has like a simple story, but it's different. I played like an hour and a half of it last night. But I wouldn't say I'm like thinking about it though. I'm not like, oh, I can't wait to go home and play Unfinished Swan. It's like, no, it's like it's finding that hook. Like I started Horizon Zero Dawn, highly praised. And I played 6 hours and I'm just like, I don't know.
So when you go home, when you're out, you're at work, you're at your office, you're at your desk, or what have you. When you're thinking about the game, what is it that you're thinking about? Like, you just want to play it again? Are you thinking about
Everything.
the characters?
When I was playing Witcher, because that's all I talked about, I think, for 8 months, because I'm really busy during the summer, so in my free time, that's all I would do is just play The Witcher. I would just go home and just sit and play it for past my bedtime. But like, and I'd be at my desk and I'd be, I'd answer emails or something at work, but I would just have a tab open on Chrome with like Wikipedia Witcher, and I'd just be reading up on it and watching Let's Plays or videos and just getting more insight, more in depth on the creation of the game, just everything about it.
So you just like to get fucking ensconced.
And it's, and I feel like I'm in a bad place because of The Witcher 3, because I think now I'm comparing everything to the feeling, not how good the game is, because you can argue some games I might have touched are better in some aspects or what have you, but I'm looking for that game to suck me in. And
you're like a rock star that like opened for the Beatles, and like The Witcher was your Beatles, and now you're just trying to find that high again.
Like I peaked. I'm trying to find that high, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's tough to find.
You've mentioned that the game that has come close, and I'm surprised it's a game that hasn't come up yet, considering the amount of time we spend with it. Overwatch.
Now, the thing with Overwatch is I don't know if I'm just really excited about playing it, because I don't really play it on my own. I don't go home and be like, I'm going to play some comp for 4 hours tonight. No, I'm not thinking that. I'm thinking, I hope the guys are on, because I want to play with the guys. Because it's more of like it's me hanging out with you guys during the week kind of thing, without seeing each other. So I wouldn't say, I love Overwatch. I'm getting way more into it. Like I keep trying new characters, and I keep expanding what I do in a match and getting and understanding. It's like each character is a level. I've played every map. I understand how every map works now, using basic characters, and now I'm using other characters and applying that to the stages, the comps of my team, the comps of the opposing team, and seeing how I can make it fit. You have competitive Overwatch, everyone uses the same characters, and it's like pretty much banging two rocks together. It's not too complicated. They think they figured it out, but it's just fun trying to make something that people would say shouldn't work, because they're made for a reason. Each character is made for a reason, and you can apply that to any scenario.
Branch out, man. Try stuff.
Maximizing the most. So it's like a game within a game, to a point. Yeah.
So Zach, I'm going to ask you this question, and knowing full well what your answer is, but what is your favorite video game?
It's I wouldn't say by a mile, but it's way, way up there, easily in the top 3 is Chrono Trigger.
Okay.
Beaten that game so many times, and it still holds up. Like, oh my god, talk about a game aging well. It's fantastic. The story's just as good. If anything, it's better as I got older, considering how young I was when I first played it. So I can read into things a little bit more, and the story's a little more complex than what an 8-year-old is supposed to expect in a game. Other than that, I was really trying to think. Like, I like a mix between good story, good gameplay. Half-Life 2, even the story's good, but gameplay, talk about tight mechanics and just everything that game does just works well. Yeah. Whether it's driving, shooting, the physics of the game, the gravity gun is like the coolest thing ever. When that game came out, like, that was mind-blowing. It's like, I can pick up anything in this game with this gun and shoot it at anything.
Yeah.
And then it gets super powered, and you're like, I can just pick up the enemies with this gun and shoot them at each other. Like, this is awesome.
Now, I asked you that because I kind of want to set you up here. So your favorite game, or at least what is consistently in the pantheon of the top 3 is Chrono Trigger. So separate from plot points, what's your favorite thing about Chrono Trigger?
Plot points.
Like, what is it about? What does that do for you? What is the big thing about that game, you think?
I think, like, I really like JRPGs, but I wouldn't say, they've gotten more complex or less complex as you keep going, and a lot of games have RPG elements now. Chrono Trigger, I think, just has a good balance between not being overly complicated, but deep enough to satisfy. Getting that new sword, or buying like a new armor for your party, grinding to get some experience or gil so you can do all that. Learning new techs and combining the techs. And that game has so many endings. You can play with different party members, you can mix the techs and your strategies. You can play it the easy way and just know what every boss's weakness is, and just make sure you have what you should have at that point and just mow through it. So, yeah.
I was going to say, so the way you described it is, when I was playing it, because I played mine on the 3DS or the DS.
The
when it came
DS,
out.
yeah. Best port I think it
It's
had.
fantastic, and it feels like it was a challenge, but it felt like the game was rooting for me in a way. Like, it doesn't hold your hand,
No.
but it like pushes you just but like in an encouraging sense.
The pacing is fantastic.
That's
you
what I'm
never
going for,
hit a spot
yes.
in that game where you're like, crap. I gotta be like 10 levels higher to get past this. No, it's not like that. I think a good game that you compare that to was Kingdom Hearts. In a way, was kind of like that in terms of pacing.
Yep.
Like it wasn't hard. Like I can't even remember like ever dying my first time playing through that game. And if I did,
At least on the second one, I think
it was like
something that.
stupid easy, but it was still challenging. Like you know what you have to do to win, and you just have to execute.
Yeah.
It's not like you can make a mistake and you're fine.
So
I
you
guess
like being pushed a little bit when you come to
yeah,
games.
and I now that I think about it, like Witcher kind of did that. Like Witcher wasn't like this crazy Dark Souls tough game. It gave you the tools to beat it, and you just had to use them. And it didn't make it hard for you to figure out what those tools are. Like you kind of pace yourself through. It's like, oh, you have oils, and this can weaken certain kinds of enemies. Oh, how do I know what kind of enemy this is? You can look it up in your menu. Like I never use a bestiary more in any game my entire life than in Witcher. I felt like I opened it up almost every battle for a while. Like,
certain quests,
you have to
push the gate to push the quest line forward. You have to go into your bestiary.
That's pretty cool.
And
So it sounds like, in the sense of like one of your favorite things about games isn't necessarily the mechanics, but a game that
it executes.
makes you want to use the mechanics.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Like if you play a game like say like Arkham Asylum, for example, you could go through and just do simple take down everybody all the time. The game doesn't tell you like, oh, you have to use the remote boomerang. Like you can get through everything without using all the special tools and abilities, just by using the basics you have in the beginning of the game. And it doesn't mean it's hard either doing it that way. But if a game has all these mechanics, like people put them in there for a reason because they're fun. But if you don't need them to play, then what's the point of having them? Like if you incorporate what you're putting into the game, make use of everything that's in there, and make it easy to understand and to go through the game, then I mean, it's like what Ken said. Like it's a game that tries to be something and does it. It doesn't try to be something it's not, and forces its way into being in between six things. Or like you can just sit there like Final Fantasy 15. You don't have to do many abilities. You can kind of just like hold a button and get through the game.
I'm also hearing you say that you like an experience that gives you freedom, that allows you to play it
not
the way that you would like to play.
Yes and no, because you can have freedom in a game, but that doesn't mean I'm going to do everything that it's giving me if I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Like
So
if you're
game
playing like Bayonetta doesn't have. I mean, I never played Bayonetta.
So you want a game that has freedom, but makes you want to experience all the different ways. Yes. Okay.
Well put.
Because just question, Bayonetta doesn't the character have multiple moves, like different move combinations?
There's different weapons, and those change up. It's basically like changing up a weapon is like picking a different character in a fighting game.
Actually, just to bounce off Bayonetta, going back, I was playing Darksiders, and Darksiders, when you level up, you can teach yourself new abilities. Like, oh, if I hold triangle and up and R1, I can do this move. But you never really have to use it.
Yeah.
You can just keep hitting square and dodging.
No, and Bayonetta is the same way.
Yeah.
But Bayonetta did it in such a way that it was like, I want to go through this game again, but I want to use this weapon set. Because I thought that weapon set was cool, but, I didn't use it enough. I want to use it more now. It's so there's that. It's that twofold. There's a lot to do, and you make me want to do it. Like I described Persona 5 to you the other day. I want to experience everything that game has to offer. That's why I plan on playing it again. Yeah. Because there were things that I did not get to experience in my first playthrough. And I felt like by the end, I was like, oh, I really get this game. I was downing bosses on my first try more often than not. They were a challenge.
Because you're kick-ass, dude.
They were a challenge.
You used Ryuji in Fights with the Pipe.
I did not.
I don't get any of these
Oh,
references.
see, you're doing it
My
wrong.
party was I don't want to give away my party.
Yeah, don't give it away.
It had Joker in it.
Spoilers, there's parties.
It had Joker in it.
Joker.
So, what is your definition?
Oh,
Yeah,
me?
good game.
I'm
Yeah,
so
what about
glad you
you,
asked,
Colin?
because there is only one thing that a game truly, truly needs in order to be good. Not just to me, but to literally every person in the world. And I can't believe you guys missed it, because it's right in front of your faces. In order for a game to be truly good, all you need to be able to do is double jump. And the end.
That's a lot of games that aren't very good.
I know, man. I don't know why you're
There's some games where you can't
talk
even
a lot
about
of games
period.
just fell off
You
my
can't
top
even
10
jump
list.
sometimes.
A lot of games just fell off my top 10 list. Superman 64 moved up really high.
No, for a game to me, what makes a game good? Man, what do I look for? What do I look for in a game? What do I look for in a nice video game? It's a wonderful question. I'm so glad that I get to go into it. I'm stalling. No, my main takeaways, my favorite games that I like to play are typically games that are story driven. I love RPGs. I love those games, those adventures. Things like Last of Us has great gameplay. Last of Us, but it's a story that I come to. Mm-hmm. I love the Telltale games. Love them, every single one of them. And the thing is, it's because when I play it, it takes me somewhere. You said it. That was like the first word you said was escapism, Ken, when you were talking about what makes a game good to you. Because what makes a game good to me is when I play it, I have all the lights off, I have the curtains drawn, and I turn it on, and the music starts, and I'm just there. The reason that games and stories and books and these things exist is because it can take you out of the real world and put you in a place that's whimsical or different and fun, and can introduce you to these ideas and just transport you to someplace better. And I'm not saying I've got a bad life or anything like that, but what I'm saying is when I play a game, I just want to be in it. I want to be taken to that spot. I want to have a beautiful score. Like my iPod right now is filled up with the Kingdom Hearts soundtrack. I've got like the music from Firewatch on there because I just want to feel just that. Same thing I ask for my movies. Same thing I ask for my books. I just want to be taken away. And so my favorite games are the ones like Kingdom Hearts, man. I put on Kingdom Hearts, and Dearly Beloved starts on the piano, and you see Sora on the beach, and you hear the ocean waves. Even just that main menu, I'm immediately taken somewhere else. I don't know if it's quite nostalgia, but it makes me feel like a kid again. I like that. I can't really get that from... And I love Overwatch. It's the thing I play more than anything, but I can't get that with Overwatch because it doesn't have that story. So what makes a game good to me is I just want to be brought somewhere. I want to feel something, whether it's heartache and disgust at the end of Last of Us or at the end of walking through a room full of slaughtered, bloodied bodies in Hotline Miami. I just want to see something and feel something that I couldn't in the real world. And I think my favorite thing about video games is I like playing them, but I like talking about them with other people who have played them. Like, I like the idea of this podcast being like, I want to talk about Booker DeWitt. Was he inherently a bad guy or not? I want to discuss, the protagonists of Persona 5, are they doing the right thing? I want to talk about how games can express feelings by you controlling somebody having those feelings. That's why I like the games where I can name the protagonist, because if he's feeling something, I'm going to feel the same thing. If he makes a connection, I like having games with casts of characters because it's like meeting a bunch of new fictional friends, Like I feel like I know who Zell is. I know what it would be like hanging out with Candaris Ordo, some KOTOR reference for all you guys out there. I like that's why I love the Final Fantasy games, because the total package with the music and everything there. I just want to dive in. When I play a video game, like, it's weird. Like, if I get a new game specifically, and I get home, I can't pop it in until I like clean the area that I'm gonna play in, and there's like no one there. Like, if I'm playing on the main TV in my living room, my roommate comes home, I'll turn it off because someone else is there, and I feel exposed or something, which is weird. Like my old roommate, I couldn't play in their presence because I just didn't like. I don't want distractions from everything. I just want to be in it. If I can't like wake up like, oh, I've got like half an hour before I have to go to work, I'm not going to take that time to play a video game because it's not enough time for me to get into it. I want to get into it. That's what I want from a game. I want to get into something, and that's what I like about my games. That's what I love about my games. That's what I love about video games in general. It's how they make me feel, and then I like to figure out how it made my friends feel. So I think what I'd really like to do with this podcast is, it's fun to talk about. You can download a million different shows about, like, today we're gonna review Nier Automata. And that's great. If you want to listen to reviews, it's totally fine. But I want to talk about what Nier Automata had to say, or what it did to me emotionally, and discuss. I want to have those talks about characters, about score. I want to argue, like, what is the best opening theme that plays in a game. I want to talk about which party member in this RPG, are they the id, who's the super ego, who's the ego, and I want to really dive into the discussion, to the real meat and potatoes of things. And that's what I think I come to video games for. And that's what I want to talk about when it comes to video games. Video games are fun to kill time and drink. When you're a kid, you're drinking your soda, you're eating your Twinkies while you're playing, and it's cool because you don't have school tomorrow. But, like, it wasn't just about not having homework. It was about feeling something. And that's why I play them. And that's what I look for.
People oftentimes like ask me, they're like, oh, when you get out of work, what do you go home and do? And I've gotten to the point where I'm very honest. I'm like, I'm going to go home and I'm going to play video games. I'm going to play whatever game I'm playing at the time. A couple of years ago, it hit me that I don't really watch a lot of TV. And people are like, oh, well, what? There's so many good shows out. Well, there's lots of shows that I'm really into.
Too many.
But I don't get drawn in by TV because for me it's a very inactive experience.
Passive.
It's passive, exactly. And, I think all three of us have talked about that immersion, that escapism.
Immersion, thank you.
Again,
the English professor.
A good book, any book, cannot continue without your input. You have to turn the page. You have to read the next word, whether it be a graphic novel, whether it be a regular prose novel, whether it be poetry. It cannot continue without you. A video game, regardless of what kind of game it is, it requires your input for enjoyment. Those are the things I enjoy. I enjoy novels. I enjoy video games. I enjoy things that require me. They need to immerse me to keep the story going. Some people say, like, oh, I'm going to go home and binge watch the show on Netflix, and that's great. I've done it, and there's plenty of shows I love. But I'm going to go home and I'm going to binge watch Persona 5. I'm going to binge play Persona 5. I'm going to binge play Witcher. I'm going to binge play Overwatch because I get immersed. Mm-hmm. I want to know, like, what can I do to get better? What happens next in the story? And I know none of it can continue without me. And that's where my enjoyment lies. And that's why it's not, it's no more a time killer than watching a TV show or watching a movie or reading a book. But, like, time killers make them sound like they're all wonderful endeavors to do with your time because so much can be gained from doing all of them. Mm-hmm. I've learned just as much about myself, you could say, playing video games as I've learned reading an Ernest Hemingway novel. and that's a lot for both.
Yeah, because the sun also rises. I've tried like 3 times and I just can't get through it.
Yeah. The main character is there. Never mind.
Let's do a Hemingway podcast instead.
All right, break.
Well, that's episode 2. We're gonna talk all Hemingway.
Old Man in the Sea video game adaptation. It's a rail shooter where you play as the boat. I feel emotionally drained after the explanation there. I think there's so many different things that you can get out of video games, and so many different things people get out. Like, even right at this table, we have story, we have competition, we have collection, we have the mechanics, the immersion, and that's what I think people come to video games for. That's why people play them. Like, I don't think when you say video games, like, even inherently, it's a game.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, why? Like, video games are also art.
Very much.
You know, just mixed in with the art, there's also just goofy stuff to play. But there's so many things that video games can give you.
I mean, if you go, you have things like Mario that just fun, jump around, Mario Kart, Nintendo stuff. I mean, you have Uncharted, which is action movie kind of story,
like
characters.
Playing Indiana Jones.
You have games like
the dream.
Journey. Journey is simple mechanics. You beat it in an hour and a half, and it's just, you're in awe like the entire time because it's just so. That game is an experience. Like, it's emotionally, you just get invested, and there's not even a word said throughout the game. It's everything is shown to you. It's an experience, and that's the thing with video games. I think compared to like a book or a TV show, like you said, like it takes you in, but it takes you in deeper. I mean, I'm not much of a book guy, so I guess I can't really compare a video game to how much you guys get sucked into reading a good novel or something like that. But that's what I get out of video games. It's an active immersion into something where you don't have to worry about anything else for who knows how long. Whether it's 30 minutes, 8 hours, awesome.
I think that's something that the 3 of us can agree on is that. And if you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to go on a limb and say that you also probably agree with us when I say that video games are awesome. They're so fucking good.
And if you don't, play a video game.
Yeah.
But not all video games are for everybody.
No. No.
No matter if you think video games are stupid and they're childish and they're immature, there is a game that exists that you will obsess over.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Like,
because the main population would say, especially non-gamers, would be like Call of Duty, and like it's all violence and it's all this. It's like, I love playing games that aren't violent at all.
I remember Candy Crush when it was called Tetris Attack.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ground for us to cover, and I hope that everyone listening will stick around. We'll really dive into this sort of if you like this analysis, this discussion of games and game culture itself, this is what you're going to come to us for. That's what you can expect from local co-op. You can see 3 best friends coming together to talk cooperatively about games, but not always cooperatively, because chances are good we're going to argue. Because best fighting game of all time, I can't say for sure is Soul Calibur 2, but we're gonna come back around on that one. I think that's that deserves a little bit of debate.
And also cool with the best friends thing.
Cool with the best friends thing. See, it's already throwing it down. I meant me and Zach, and you're just also here. We need somebody who plays arcade games. Yeah, I think just from saying out loud what it is that makes games as affecting to me is just open up a door of so many things that I can't wait to get into. I'm
excited. I'm very excited.
So, local co-op, I think we can kind of wrap it up now. I would suggest for our pilot episode. If you dig our episode, please do us a favor, give us a review on iTunes or I don't know if Stitcher does.
Wherever you find this podcast.
Wherever you're doing the podcast app. If you can leave us a review, a rating, whatever you can do, that'd be fantastic. We are going to be on, you can head to our website,
lcopod.com.
Perfect.
We're also on Twitter and Instagram at LCO Podcast or at LCO Podcast.
Absolutely. Head to the website where you'll find blog posts and episode entries written by your three favorite party members right here. And I think that'll do it for our initial pilot episode. Thank you so much, everybody.
One more thing before we end this first episode. Huge thanks to Alex and JR of Opinions May Vary for letting us use their studio. If you guys have not listened to their podcast before, definitely check it out. It's very good.
That podcast is kick-ass.
We've all guested on it at some point. Colin has hosted, actually, an episode, but big thanks to them. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Those guys are tremendous. And that show is a real go-to show for, if you like anything, you can listen to Opinions May Vary, because that show is fantastic. So, thanks again, guys, for tuning in. That's going to do it for our first episode. My name's Colin.
Ken.
And Zach.
And thanks for listening to Local Co-op. We'll catch you next time. Ding 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 ding. Game noise.